When wildlife guide Tom Reeves heard the cries echoing from the swamp, he didn't expect to find a grizzly bear cub, terrified, bleeding, and surrounded by circling alligators. What he did next defied every survival rule, but what happened after would shock not just him, but an entire rescue team. This is a true story of instinct, courage, and the bond that formed when a man risked everything for a creature no one else would dare to save. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, we can keep sharing more true emotional stories just like this one. What you're about to hear may just change the way you see both fear and love. It was supposed to be a routine morning. Tom Reeves had spent most of his adult life in the Florida backwoods, guiding tourists, rescuing abandoned wildlife, and keeping to himself more than he probably should have. After serving as a combat medic, the silence of the swamps had become his refuge. He'd seen enough pain to last 2 lifetimes, but that morning, just after dawn, something pierced the stillness, a scream, high-pitched, desperate, not human but close. Tom dropped his thermos on the porch, grabbed his field pack, a small tranquilizer gun, and sprinted toward the sound. The cry came from deep in the Everglades, through mangroves and cypress trees, past thick mud and clouds of mosquitoes. He moved fast but silent, trained from years of knowing when the wild was off. Then he saw it, a grizzly bear cub, barely 6 months old, trapped on a small patch of dry ground, panting, blood trailing from its hind leg. It was surrounded on all sides by water and movement, alligators, at least 4 of them, circling slowly in the dark green water, eyes above the surface like sentinels. Tom's heart slammed into his ribs. There were no wild grizzlies in Florida. None. This cub was lost or dumped, and now it was seconds from death. The cub saw him, its eyes locked onto his, wide, dark, pleading. It didn't growl. It didn't try to run. It just looked like it was begging. Tom didn't think. He moved. He stepped out onto the narrow branch path, mud sucking at his boots, pulled a flare from his belt, and lit it with shaking hands. He shouted, waved the flame, and tossed it into the water. The gators hissed, recoiling, splashing away in jerky waves, but not for long. Tom used the moment. He leapt across the muck, splashing hard onto the island of dry ground, grabbed the cub by the scruff. It cried out but didn't fight. The gators turned, no more time. He cradled the cub against his chest and ran back to the boat, his heart still racing. Tom wrapped the cub's leg in gauze with the same hands that had once stopped human bleeding under fire. The cub whimpered once. The ride back was slow. Tom had wrapped the cub in an old wool blanket and laid it gently in the bow of his aluminum skiff, steering carefully along the twisting canal that led out of the swamp. Every few minutes, he glanced down to make sure it was still breathing. The cub was trembling, not from cold, the Florida heat was stifling even at that hour, but from shock. Its paw was badly gashed, possibly from barbed wire or the rough edge of a trap. There were scratches down its flank, raw and still bleeding. But what haunted Tom most wasn't the injuries. It was the look in the cub's eyes, panic, but beneath it something more human, exhaustion, confusion, a loss no creature should have to carry. Back at his base, a modest wooden cabin built on stilts, Tom carefully carried the cub inside. He'd built the place for solitude, not for visitors, and definitely not for wounded predators. He cleared a corner of the room and laid the cub down on a soft pile of old towels. Then he cleaned the wound, applied antiseptic, and wrapped it with practiced gentle hands. The cub barely whimpered. Tom sat back, his brow furrowed. How the hell did a grizzly end up in the Everglades? It didn't make sense. Grizzlies didn't roam anywhere near the southeast. Even captive ones were highly regulated. Smuggling one into Florida would take serious money and serious recklessness. And someone had done it. Someone had dumped it here. The next day, Tom made calls, local wildlife agencies, rescue groups, sanctuaries. No reports of missing cubs. No licensed transports. No permits. Nothing. But there was one call, quiet, off the record, from a woman at a rescue center in Georgia. There's been a rise in illegal exotic animal trafficking, she said. Private collectors, backyard zoos. Some get shut down, but the animals they get scattered. Tom gritted his teeth. They dumped it like trash. He wished he could say he was surprised. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. The cub had stopped trembling. It slept near the door, curled in the blanket, breathing steady. Tom sat nearby, staring at the fire. He thought of a convoy in Iraq, a boy, maybe 9 years old, who'd been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They'd pulled him from a destroyed building, his arm shattered, eyes dazed, blinking up at Tom the same way this cub had. That boy hadn't made it. Tom hadn't forgotten his name, and he knew without question he wasn't going to lose this one. At dawn, the cub stirred. It opened its eyes and lifted its head, weak but alert. 3 days passed. The cub stayed close to the corner near the window where the sun filtered in through warped wooden blinds. Its wounds were healing slower than Tom wanted, but better than expected. The infection had receded. It was eating now, mostly fish, some soft fruit, and a special milk blend Tom picked up on a 2-hour trip into town. What surprised him most was how quiet it was. The cub didn't cry. Didn't growl. It just watched him, always watched him with eyes too dark and too deep for something so young. Tom had seen that look before, in soldiers, in orphans, in himself. By the end of the week, the cub had started standing again, wobbly at first, like a toddler. Front paws stiff from disuse, but it tried every day. It tried. And Tom saw that for what it was, the kind of spirit that refuses to quit, even when everything hurts. He caught himself talking to it more now. "Look at you," he muttered one morning, watching as the cub shuffled to the bowl on its own, built like a bear but walking like a drunk raccoon. The cub huffed softly. Tom froze. Was that a laugh? He stared at it, it stared back. Tom shook his head. "All right. You want a name, don't you?" He looked around the room, at the cracked maps, the fishing gear, the old leather journal near the fire. Then he nodded, almost to himself. "Let's go with Lucky. Because you shouldn't be here. And you shouldn't be alive. But somehow, you are." The cub blinked, then slowly leaned its weight against the wall, not to collapse, but to sit, as if accepting. Tom hadn't named anything in a long time. Not since the dog he and Sarah adopted before she got sick. Not since the child they lost. Giving something a name, to Tom, was a promise. And now he'd made one. But the world doesn't let promises go untested. That night, just after 2 a.m., Tom heard a noise. A car engine, not close, but not far. He moved fast, dousing the lantern, grabbing the rifle from the wall, stepping onto the porch in his bare feet. The swamp was dark, but the stars were bright, and through the trees, he saw it, headlights, parked, still running. And then, voices. Tom didn't sleep. He sat in the dark for hours, rifle across his lap, eyes on the door. Outside, the headlights eventually faded. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Tense. Measured. Whoever had been out there had taken their time, watching, scouting. And now they knew where he lived. At first light, Tom did what he always did, he moved. He loaded Lucky into a padded crate and carefully carried him into the back of his truck. The cub wasn't fully recovered, but strong enough to sit upright, alert, and quiet. Tom drove 2 hours west to the nearest wildlife rehab center. The place was clean. Professional. The woman who ran it, Carla, was someone Tom trusted. She took one look at the cub and frowned. "Where the hell did you get a grizzly bear?" Tom told her everything. No lies. Carla didn't blink. "That's trafficking," she said. "High-end. Organized. Bears that age don't just end up in Florida swamps. You got lucky finding him alive." "Not me," Tom said. "Him." Carla agreed to run full medical workups. She'd care for Lucky, she said, at least temporarily. Keep him away from the public eye. "But if someone comes asking questions..." "They won't," Tom cut in. She gave him a long look. "You're going back, aren't you?" Tom nodded. "They found me once. They'll come again." Back at the cabin, Tom reinforced the door, cleaned the rifle, and hiked out to reset the trail cameras he'd planted years ago, relics from a past where he tracked poachers and illegal trappers for conservation groups. Now, he was doing it again. For one bear. A cub. Lucky. That night, they came back. Tom heard the tires long before he saw the light. He was already in position, rifle resting on the windowsill, safety off, breath slow. 2 men. No uniforms. Plain clothes. One of them scanned the tree line with a flashlight. The other opened the back of a pickup, and Tom's stomach turned. Inside were cages. Stacked. Empty, but waiting. They weren't looking for Lucky. They were collecting. And this time, it wouldn't just be him. Tom waited until they stepped away from the vehicle, moving toward the trail. Then he stepped out of the cabin. The flashlight snapped toward him. The men froze. "Looking for something?" Tom asked, voice flat. "Didn't mean to bother you," one said. "We're tracking a lost animal. Large cub. Dangerous." Tom didn't move. "She's not dangerous," he said. The man frowned. "Carla called at sunrise." "He's not eating," she said. "He's refusing everyone but you." Tom was already halfway through lacing his boots. "I'm on my way." When he arrived at the center, Lucky was curled in the far corner of a large enclosed space. Clean. Shaded. Safe. But his body was stiff. His eyes dull again. The progress they had fought so hard for was slipping away by the hour. Carla stood beside Tom as he leaned down near the enclosure. "He won't let anyone near him," she said. "Even with food." Tom knelt. "Hey, Lucky," he said softly. The cub's ears twitched. His head lifted. And in that moment, something changed. The look in Lucky's eyes was clear. "Why did you leave me?" Tom sighed and slowly stepped inside the enclosure. Carla started. "You sure?" "No," he said. "But he is." Lucky didn't growl. Didn't run. He walked toward Tom and pressed his head gently against the man's boot. Tom swallowed hard. He knelt down and, without thinking, rested a hand on the bear's thick, matted neck. "You're not just some rescue case," he whispered. "You're mine now. Whether I'm ready or not." After a long silence, Carla said, "He won't last here." "Not like this." Tom nodded. I'll take him back. But not forever. Just until he's stronger. Carla raised an eyebrow. You sure? He'll be making enemies. Tom looked through the fencing toward the trees. I already did. Over the next week, Tom made changes. He reinforced the cabin walls, built a shaded lean-to outside, stocked medical supplies, emergency food, and even installed a hidden, motion-activated camera system linked to a solar battery. But more than that, he gave Lucky a routine. Early walks to the marsh edge. Feeding sessions with salmon and softened vegetables. Rest under the porch. Play, if you could call it that, with an old tire and water barrel. And slowly, the cub began to trust again. Not just survive, but live. Until the fourth night. Tom was sitting by the fire, Lucky dozing beside the porch rail, when a low click echoed through the clearing. Then another. Trail cams. Tom stood, grabbed the monitor, and checked the feed. 2 figures. Same men. Different clothes. Better gear. And this time, they weren't just watching. They were armed. Tom moved fast. He grabbed the satellite phone, his emergency line to Carla, and keyed in the code she gave him for threat level high. Then he whispered, "They're here. And they're done asking nicely." The night air was still. Too still. Tom extinguished every visible light, closed the cabin windows, and set Lucky inside, behind the table, wrapped in a blanket. The cub watched him with wide, quiet eyes, as if sensing what was coming. Tom checked his rifle, loaded 2 extra mags into his vest, then grabbed a flare and tucked a hunting knife into his boot. He hadn't worn the old field gear since his last contract in the Middle East, but tonight wasn't about war. It was about protection and dignity. At 1:43 a.m., they came. This time, no headlights, just movement through the trees. Quiet. Calculated. Not amateurs. Through the trail cam feed, Tom saw 2 figures break the tree line, one near the back trail, the other flanking toward the marsh. Both wore black tactical clothing and carried what looked like tranquilizer rifles. But it wasn't what they were wearing that made Tom's stomach turn, it was the cages behind them. Already open. Already waiting. He moved fast. He triggered the floodlights on the back end of the cabin, solar-powered, angled high. The clearing lit up instantly, throwing the men into silhouette. They paused. One raised a hand. "We don't want trouble." Tom stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand. Not aimed, but not lowered. "You already found it," he said. The man took a step forward. "It's not your bear." "He's not your product," Tom replied. A tense pause. Then the second man circled wider, edging toward the side of the cabin. Tom knew what that meant. A pincer. Without warning, Tom popped the flare, tossed it to the edge of the woods. It hissed and flared, casting chaotic red light across the tree trunks. Lucky stirred inside the cabin, pacing near the door. And then something no one expected, a roar. Not from Tom. From the cub. A low, chest-deep growl that rattled the floorboards. Then Lucky appeared at the doorway, standing on all fours. His shoulders were wider now, his fur bristled in the wind. One of the men froze. "He's still small," the other whispered, but his voice cracked. Tom didn't raise his gun. He didn't have to. Lucky stepped forward, teeth bared. Not in rage, but in warning. A sound that said, "You're not taking me again." The 2 men hesitated, then turned and disappeared into the trees. Tom didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch, Lucky curled beside him, both watching the tree line for hours. But the threat was gone. For now. And in the quiet that followed, Tom reached down and stroked the cub's thick, solid neck. "You did good, kid." 3 days later, Tom stood on the edge of the airstrip, the morning sun low behind him, casting long shadows over the gravel and the single-prop cargo plane waiting with its door open. Beside him, Lucky sat on his haunches, gaze fixed forward, chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. He'd grown stronger, not just physically, but in the way he moved now. Head higher. Steps more certain. The wounds had faded. The fear had too. But there was something else in his eyes now, something Tom recognized with both pride and heartbreak. Readiness. Carla approached with the transfer papers in hand. "He'll be safe," she said. "It's a private reserve. Thousands of acres. Only staff on site. No cages. Ever." Tom nodded. "You can visit," she added gently. "I know." The loading ramp was steep, and Lucky hesitated. His claws scraped slightly against the metal. Then he turned, not panicked, not resisting. Just pausing. Looking back at Tom. Not at the cabin. Not at the swamp. Just him. Tom stepped forward. He knelt, hands open, voice steady. "You're going to be okay now." Lucky blinked slowly. And then, just like that, he walked up the ramp. No cage. No leash. Just trust. Tom stayed until the plane was out of sight, a small blur over the treetops. He didn't cry. But he didn't smile either. Not yet. Back at the cabin, the silence was different. Not empty. Not haunted. Just quiet. Tom cleaned. Repaired the railing Lucky had chewed. Folded the blanket that had become the cub's favorite spot to sleep. Set it on the bed. Then he sat on the porch, the journal in his lap, the one Sarah had started years ago and that he had filled, page by page, since Lucky came into his life. On the last page he wrote, "He was never mine. But for a little while, we saved each other." Weeks passed. Tom went back to working the land, checking trail cams, making supply runs into town. He said little. But when people asked if he was okay, he didn't lie anymore.